The hospital should be within walking distance, Roy said as he, believe it or not, helped Molly out of the car. Shocked by the sudden turn of events, Karen found herself in the passenger seat while Roy took the driver's seat. Well, that's it. We've made up with Dad, so we're going to enjoy a family trip to Hawaii, just the three of us, he said and then drove off. What a situation. I was so taken aback by what had just happened that I was lost for words. I'm sorry. Molly's hoarse voice brought me back to reality. At that point, nothing else mattered, and I immediately called a taxi to take Molly to the hospital. That was all I could focus on. And inside, a flame of anger was burning, one that I would never let extinguish. Roy and his mother could never have imagined I would take such bold action. I silently vowed revenge on Roy and my mother-in-law for taking my family for granted. My name is Karen. I'm 42 years old and work as a nurse. My husband, Roy, is 3 years my senior at 45 and works in an office. Our daughter, Molly, just turned 10 and is a quiet child who enjoys reading by herself during breaks at home and school. Due to my job, I hardly had any male friends, and I never attended mixers because I was focused on my career. Then, right after I turned 30, a friend who didn't want to go to a matchmaking party alone because she was nervous convinced me to accompany her. That's where I met Roy. He laughed about having focused solely on his job and missing out on marriage opportunities. I felt a strange kinship with him, and before I knew it, we had exchanged contact information. Roy turned out to be a very kind person, with a steady job and income, and he was understanding of my irregular nursing hours. There was no denying that I was drawn to him. Roy felt the same way. I want to know more about you, Karen, he said, which made me very happy. So, we began a relationship with the intention of marriage, and we got married when I was 31. We had Molly the following year. And since we both agreed that one child was enough, we didn't try for more. Now, 10 years have passed. One day, Roy dropped a bombshell. Mom's going to be staying with us from tomorrow. Just so you know. I couldn't hide my shock at the sudden announcement of cohabitation and blurted out, "What do you mean? I can't just accommodate your mother on such short notice." According to Roy, his parents had a huge argument, and his mother declared she was leaving and started packing. Naturally, the only place she could go was to her only son, Roy. So, that's why she was coming to stay with us out of the blue. I was adamantly against the idea of living with even my own parents, let alone my in-laws. Coming to live with us just because she had a fight with Dad? What about our circumstances? Can't you reconsider this? Roy seemed to take offense to my pushback. You really hate the idea of living with my mom that much? Huh, I never thought you were so cold. Of course, I couldn't say that I hated the idea. I was too scared of Roy's reaction to say anything. I swallowed my words and glared at him instead. Seeing that I wouldn't talk back, Roy smugly said, "Don't bother resisting. Just get the room ready for my mom. Firstly, we're renting, so adding another person requires permission from the landlord or management company, which would be my responsibility since I get housing assistance through my job. Also, our apartment has 2 bedrooms, with one room for Molly and the other for us. There's no room to spare in our current setup," I said. But Roy, unfazed, suggested, "Then move Molly to the living room for her studies. That way, we can make sure she's doing her homework, and it's a good solution. She's only in elementary school, she doesn't need her own room. So, Molly will be staying in the living room for a while." I felt dizzy at his appalling suggestion. How can you say something like that? Are you prioritizing your mother over your own daughter? Huh? I didn't say that exactly. But yeah, I owe my mom for raising me. So, that's that. Despite my protests, which I repeated several times, Roy didn't budge, and as soon as Molly returned, he told her, "Your room is going to be Grandma's from now on. So, start cleaning it out right now." I rushed to stop him, but Molly said it was okay and began moving her things to the living room. Watching her back, I felt a pain in my chest, and at the same time, my hatred for Roy seemed to swell. Lately, Roy hasn't been contributing to household chores or even putting in his share of the living expenses, and he's been coming home late at night. I had been putting up with it because Molly is only 10, but today's behavior seemed to be the last straw. The next day, as expected, my mother-in-law arrived in the evening and immediately started yelling. "What is this dump? You expect us to live here? Roy, are you out of your mind? This is insane." Our neighbor happened to come home at the same time and gave us curious looks, so I hurriedly apologized. I called the property management company, and they said it was fine not to go through any special procedures for a short-term stay. A report was enough. Honestly, I hoped my mother-in-law would return home as soon as possible, preferably within 2 weeks. But my hopes were dashed. First off, the huge suitcase my mother-in-law brought made it clear she planned to stay for at least a month, which disheartened me. She barged into the room without a care for me and looked around as if she was surveying the place. Then, she opened the fridge without permission and exclaimed, "What's this? The fridge is practically empty. Do you think my son and granddaughter can get proper nutrition from this? Really, Karen, you're hopeless." I had planned to go shopping today, but because my mother-in-law suddenly said she was coming, I had to clean up right after work and didn't have time to shop. In times like these, takeout should be the go-to. Lately, Roy has been saying he prefers takeout over my cooking, with all sorts of sarcastic comments and complaints, so I had given up. "Shall we order some takeout today?" I asked with a forced smile. But she snapped at me again. "What? I won't allow takeout. A mother and wife who doesn't cook is worthless. Now, go shopping right away and make sure you prepare a main dish, 5 side dishes, a soup, and dessert." With that, she threw the shopping bag and purse at me and slammed the door shut. Shortly after, I heard the TV blaring at high volume and her laughter from inside, making me sigh deeply for who knows how many times. An hour later, after shopping and returning home, I was shocked to see that Molly, who had come home while I was out, was doing her homework in the living room under the stern watch of my mother-in-law, who scolded her harshly for any mistakes with shouts of "That's wrong, and how can you not understand this? You're such a disappointment. Oh, who do you take after?" I stepped in quickly. "She just started learning this recently. Besides, even elementary students are taking English and programming classes these days. You can't judge by old standards." I defended Molly against my mother-in-law, but she wouldn't listen and said disdainfully, if only she had taken after her smart father, Roy. Seeing Molly's gloomy face, I quickly comforted her. "It's okay, Molly. Just go at your own pace," while giving my mother-in-law a sharp look. She didn't seem to care and started snacking voraciously out of spite. A week after my mother-in-law's arrival, my frustration was about to burst, and I confronted Roy. "I'm sorry, but I can't overlook this any longer. Do something about your mother. It's one thing for her to criticize me, but Molly is suffering too." Roy retorted with a displeased tone. "What? Why should I? You're getting help with the household chores, so don't act so high and mighty. It's Molly's fault for not being good at studying. She's the real victim here, taking after her not-so-smart mother." I snapped back for the first time, hurt as a mother to hear him talk about Molly like that. Normally, I would end the conversation to avoid hassle, but I couldn't bear it this time. And in front of Roy, my mother-in-law would act sweetly, saying, "It's fine, Karen, just sit down and have some coffee. I'll take care of the rest," she said, pretending to be about to do some housework. However, she only showed the appearance of trying to help, without actually doing anything, leaving me to do all the work later on. Even with this reality, is Roy blind to it? I confronted Roy, who believes his mother is helping me, with the frustration I've been holding in. "So, it's clear that to you, Molly isn't the priority, but your mother is. You're okay with your own daughter being criticized harshly by your mom? I couldn't stand it even if my own mother did that." Roy provocatively laughed in response. "Oh, my mom is always right. Well, unlike me, who has a college degree, you only graduated from a nursing school, so it's no wonder Molly can't do well in studies or sports. Poor thing. At that moment, I definitely felt something snap inside me. But thinking that losing my temper would be childish, I just laughed and said, "Okay, got it." A month later. Usually an early riser even on weekends, Molly didn't wake up and complained of feeling sluggish when I checked on her, wrapped in her blanket. Recalling the recent outbreak at school, I suspected the worst and took her temperature. Rushing to tell Roy, I found him inexplicably getting ready to leave. Frozen in shock, Roy nonchalantly said, "Oh right, I forgot to mention, I'm going to Hawaii with Mom and Dad." I hadn't heard anything about this trip before, but at that moment, I didn't care. Typically, Roy commutes by train, so we only have my car. Ignoring Roy, I tried to take Molly to the hospital, which is open even on weekends, but Roy and his mother appeared, luggage in tow, and made an unbelievable statement. "The hospital is within walking distance," Roy said, unbelievably taking Molly out of the car. As I was shocked by this sudden turn of events, his mother casually got into the passenger seat, and Roy took the driver's seat. "Well, that's that. We've made up with Dad, so we're off to enjoy a family trip to Hawaii, just the three of us." And with that, they drove off. Stunned by the suddenness, I was brought back to reality when Molly apologized in a hoarse voice. At that point, nothing else mattered, and I immediately called a taxi to take Molly to the hospital. That was all I could focus on. And inside, a flame of anger was burning, one that I would never let extinguish. Roy and his family could never have imagined I would take such bold action. In my mind, I cursed them for taking my family for granted, considering it their punishment. 2.5 hours later, my phone was vibrating persistently with calls from Roy. I didn't want to answer, but ignoring it wouldn't change anything. So, with a heavy sigh, I picked up the phone. Before I could speak, Roy screamed as if in agony. "Please, help!" It turned out he had caused a single-vehicle accident on the way to the airport. My car is a manual transmission. Roy technically has a manual license, but he must have forgotten how to drive it during his train commutes. He couldn't admit his lack of confidence in driving a manual in front of his mother, but of course, our insurance covers both of us in case either of us drives. So, there was nothing illegal about Roy driving. However, since he took the car against my wishes, the accident was his own fault. As I pondered this, Roy added, "We're running out of time for our flight because of the accident. It's your car, so you deal with it. It's all because of this hard-to-drive car. It guzzles gas, and what's so good about this old clunker anyway?" He began to complain, but it sounded like the whining of a loser to me. Finally reaching a point of indifference, I replied with a smile. "So what? You knew my car was a manual, right? You forcefully took it and drove away. The responsibility for an accident lies not with the owner but with the driver. Oh, you hit a guardrail, didn't you? Then, you'll be paying for the car's repair and the guardrail damages out of your own pocket." With that, I hung up the phone. The phone continued to ring stubbornly, but we were at the hospital. Molly needed further tests, as it wasn't just the flu going around. I had no time to deal with such selfish people, so I ignored the calls, and then a message notification popped up. Wondering if they switched to messaging because I wasn't answering the phone, I checked my smartphone and frowned upon seeing the sender's names. I thought Roy's parents had joined his side, but while his mother sent desperate pleas for help, his father simply asked, "What happened?" Curious, I replied only to his father, and that's when a surprising truth came to light. Turns out, his father had no idea about any trip to Hawaii and was enjoying his day with his gateball friends. Then he got a call from his wife about the accident, asking to be picked up, but with her just saying "just come," he thought it was just a prank for attention, until Roy also reached out for help. Thinking that I and his granddaughter Molly were involved, he was worried and sent a message. "Why didn't you reply to the two of them, but only to me?" When I called his father to ask this, his unexpected response came back. "It's just a hunch. After all, we are currently separated, so just the thought of dealing with her based on recent events made me not want to engage. Did my wife cause any trouble? He didn't even know his wife was staying with us, thinking she might have just dragged us into her mess. I took a deep breath and slowly explained the situation. Your wife is currently staying with us. Today, she claimed that you, and the family were off to Hawaii together. After I shared the ordeal she and Roy had put me and Molly through just before leaving. There was a long silence before he finally spoke. What is that? Unforgivable. He said in a tone lower than I'd ever heard, sending shivers down my spine. About 30 minutes after ending the call with him, a doctor finally called me in to discuss Molly's condition. It seems Molly has acute gastroenteritis and would need to be hospitalized for a bit. I sighed in relief but also felt guilty for the stress Molly had been under. Since a private room was available, we were allowed to use it. Molly, how are you feeling? We got a private room, so rest up, I said, trying to sound cheerful. Molly looked remorseful and apologized. It's my fault you had to go through all this. I'll fall behind in my studies because I'm hospitalized. I'm sorry. I rushed to her side and hugged her gently. Molly, I'm not raising you because you're good at studying, but because you're my precious child. Just be yourself. Later, Molly's grandfather, who she's always been close to, arrived at the hospital and brought joy to her face. He happily chatted with Molly about the times she won a drawing contest, which he had bragged about to his gateball friends, providing us with a moment of peace. Then, an unwelcome call came through. Roy and his mother complained. Because you didn't help us, we missed our flight. Now the trip is ruined, and we've lost the full amount for 3 people's travel expenses. You need to reimburse us. His mother joined in, shouting about missing a chance to reconcile with Dad. I was outside the hospital, and their loud voices were as if on speaker. Then, my father-in-law, who had followed me, said nonchalantly, Well, I wasn't invited to any Hawaii trip. Seems there's an extra person involved, but who could that be? Not Molly, not Karen, and certainly not me. Who, indeed? Neither Roy nor his mother expected him to be there. Starting to panic. Why is Dad at Karen's place? Roy's voice faded over the phone, clearly taken aback. I pointed out their lies and the fact that my father-in-law had seen through them, prompting them to contact me instead. His mother started to make excuses. Well, inviting Dad was a lie. This trip was supposed to be just the 2 of us. So stop prying. It was as if she was begging to be doubted. To her obvious lie, I couldn't help but respond with suppressed laughter. No, what are you talking about? I just checked the booking site, and it clearly lists 3 people. Their silence spoke volumes. Suddenly, they fell silent. Recently, Molly had told me that my mother-in-law had been tampering with my computer while I was away. Not knowing the details, but mentioning something about searching for Hawaii. So, on a whim, I logged into the travel booking site I use and found a clue. My mother-in-law had booked a trip for 3 people under my name. And the payment had already been processed on my credit card. I realized I was the one who financially suffered from this. Yet, Roy had the nerve to complain about cancellation fees. Furthermore, the fact that the reservation was for 3 people remained as evidence, so I asked who the third person was. But Roy continued to deny it. Mom must have mistakenly entered the wrong number of people. It was supposed to be just the 2 of us. Is that so? Roy sighed in relief when I responded. Anyway, the trip is cancelled, right? Then, come to the following place. We'll discuss what to do next there. Leaving Molly with a word, I left the hospital and waited at a nearby diner with my father-in-law for the 2 to arrive. Soon after, they showed up, and Roy, for some reason, started complaining angrily. The guardrail damage isn't covered by liability insurance, so you need to take care of it with your insurance. I was astonished at Roy's audacity. What? You hit it because of your carelessness. I told you to pay out of your pocket, didn't I? What are you babbling about? Glaring fiercely at him made Roy cringe and step back. Then, my mother-in-law chimed in. Never mind that. So, Karen, what did you want to talk about? Eager to get to the main topic, I appreciated her segue in a way and stated. I checked, and the dashcam recorded not only you, Roy, in the driver's seat and my mother-in-law in the passenger seat, but also an unknown young woman in the back seat. The moment I said that, their faces twisted. My car's dashcam is quite high-tech, allowing real-time viewing through a smartphone app, including past footage. Thanks to the security measures I took for a rather expensive car, it served as evidence of Roy's infidelity, which I had never anticipated. So, you lied about going with your parents and actually planned to bring your mistress along? Thanks for leaving such clear evidence. Contrary to my smile, their faces turned even paler. I had been suspicious of Roy's actions and had been looking for evidence of infidelity, planning to confront him with divorce once I had solid proof. My mother-in-law moving in and the Hawaii trip, followed by Molly's fever, had delayed my actions, but I had been contemplating divorce from the start. As the two remained silent, my father-in-law spoke up. A parent like that will have a child like that, huh? Mom, you can't say anything because you've been cheating with a younger man yourself, right? Roy was shocked, having not known this, and looked at his mother, who blushed with embarrassment at having her affair exposed in a public diner. Despite your age, you got swindled by a much younger man, and to think you fell for it? What a joke! My usually reserved father-in-law expressed his deep anger. It seemed the cause of my mother-in-law's house escape was this affair, ultimately her own doing. Disgusted, I looked at her scornfully. I'm not going to meddle in your affairs. But Roy, you're definitely getting a divorce from me. Child support, plus the car repair costs and the Hawaii trip expenses. Of course, that includes your mistress. At that, Roy, not caring about onlookers, deeply bowed and apologized. Okay. I'll pay for everything. Just please don't contact her. He revealed that his mistress was the daughter of an important client at his company, and she was unaware of his marital status. My mother-in-law had taken a liking to her because of her wealth, suggesting a trip together without any guilt. The pure mistress had taken it seriously, and Roy, flattered by her praise while driving the old manual car, crashed into a guardrail due to his negligence. My father-in-law and I exchanged looks and chuckled at the ridiculous cause of the accident. Roy said they'd handle the mistress themselves and asked to go home, leading to this moment. If it gets out that I was dating the president's daughter of a client under false pretenses, I'm definitely getting fired. Please, I'll do everything you say. So don't tell her. Come on, we were married, so can't you at least spare her feelings at the end? I've been a good husband who supported you, so I think I deserve that much. I smirked at Roy's plea and responded. All right. Then, I'll expect you to listen to all my conditions. And don't come begging for forgiveness or help later on, because I won't be listening, okay? As if I'd ever stoop to begging. All right, it's a deal. Thus, Roy and I proceeded with the divorce, and I claimed a substantial amount for child support as we ended our marriage. But that was just the beginning. What do you mean? She found out about the affair. Some time after the divorce, Roy called me in distress, having apparently forgotten to block his number. As he ranted on. This is a disaster. The client's president wants to apologize to you and is furious at me. Since you broke the promise of not telling her, you need to give back the money right now. While listening to him, I wondered how I ever married such a person. Then, I decided to reveal a truth Roy hadn't anticipated. You know I'm a car enthusiast, right? And that client's president, he runs an auto parts manufacturing company, doesn't he? Actually, I've always been a customer there. The car you crashed was repaired by them. And just by chance, his daughter, your mistress, saw the car and screamed, revealing everything. See? I didn't break any promise. Realizing the situation, Roy groaned. The woman, working hard as an apprentice mechanic at her father's company, was naturally shocked to see her boyfriend's car brought in by another woman for repairs. I simply told him the truth. My ex-husband crashed into a guardrail and caused a solo accident. Since the car was under my name, I brought it in for repairs. The mistress explained the situation to her father, and from there, the story reached Roy's company. Having an affair with your own daughter, what kind of upbringing is that? Her father was livid. So, I'm going to lose everything? Kicked out of the house, no money, disowned by my father, and only my handsome mother left. And now I'm losing my job too. But it was all his own doing. If you had lived decently, none of this would have happened. It's your own fault. Take care, and don't contact me ever again. I firmly cut off the call, making sure to block him this time. Later, when my car was repaired, I reluctantly learned about Roy's aftermath. He was indeed fired. Not only for the scandal, but also for embezzling company funds. Offered a demotion instead of returning the stolen money, Roy, already burdened with debt from payments to me, had no such option. Thus, he left the company unceremoniously. His mother remained dependent on him. At their age, working wasn't feasible, and without money, they had no choice but to live together in a small, cheap apartment. Despite the divorce, my in-laws settled without property division, leading to a life of poverty. Roy, usually bred, couldn't resist ordering expensive dishes, leading to a major argument and police involvement. His mother ended up working part-time. It was a sorry state, but given her actions, no one sympathized. Meanwhile, life for Molly and me continued as usual. I had always been the main provider, and we remained in our home, with little change in our lifestyle. Ironically, Molly's grades improved, especially in art, expressing a desire to pursue a creative path. As a parent, I supported her choices, even if they led down a difficult path. Look, I got first place in the contest again. Amazing! You truly have a talent for art. Molly visited her grandfather in the facility, maintaining a connection despite the divorce. Grateful to my former father-in-law, who believed in me, I wished him a long life. From now on, it's just Molly and me, continuing our days as usual, free from the past's burdens.